In the quiet moments of reflection, we often forget that self-love isn't a fleeting feeling but a practice rooted in timeless wisdom. The Stoics teach us that true strength begins from within, the ability to accept ourselves with compassion, even amidst chaos. It's a gentle reminder that in a world constantly demanding more, the greatest act of courage is to be tender toward our own soul. Join me as we explore the ancient path to self-love, a journey paved with resilience, serenity, and the quiet power of embracing who we truly are. Understanding self-love through a Stoic lens. Self-love, from a Stoic perspective, isn't about indulgence or superficial self-esteem. It's a profound recognition of one's value rooted in virtue and rationality. The Stoics believe that true harmony begins inward, aligning our thoughts and actions with nature's rational order. When we understand ourselves through this lens, self-love becomes a disciplined practice of appreciating our capacity for reason, resilience, and moral growth. Marcus Aurelius often reflected that the only wealth which you will keep forever is the wealth you have given away. A reminder that self-love is intertwined with our capacity to serve and improve both ourselves and others. In this approach, understanding self-love involves acknowledging that our worth is not dictated by external circumstances or fleeting pleasures. Instead, it stems from cultivating virtues like wisdom, courage, moderation, and justice. When we face setbacks or criticisms, a Stoic's instinct is not to indulge in self-pity or elevate ourselves on superficial achievements, but to evaluate those experiences objectively and see them as opportunities for growth. For example, instead of berating oneself for failing in a task, a Stoic might remind themselves that perfection is not the goal, virtue is. Such a mindset nurtures patience, humility, and a stable sense of self that isn't easily shaken. This perspective also encourages an internal dialogue that is gentle yet disciplined. Recognizing our fallibility, we learn to extend kindness inwardly, understanding that mistakes are part of the human condition. Seneca pointed out that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. Taking this to heart means nurturing a compassionate attitude toward ourselves, not as an excuse, but as a foundation for growth. Self-love, then, is cultivated through the ongoing practice of self-awareness and rational acceptance of who we are, coupled with a sincere desire to improve. It's about building a resilient core that remains steady amid life's inevitable fluctuations. Ultimately, the Stoic way to self-love invites us to step beyond transient feelings of self-worth based on external validation, and instead develop an unwavering appreciation for our inner virtues. When we focus on living ethically and aligning our actions with our highest rational nature, love for oneself becomes a natural byproduct. As Epictetus advised, make the best use of what is in your power, and take the rest as it happens, reminding us that love begins with mastering ourselves and recognizing our intrinsic dignity, even in imperfectly virtuous beings. That, in essence, is the true harmony of self-love through the Stoic lens. The foundations, virtue and inner peace. Virtue remains the heart of the Stoic approach to self-love, anchoring individuals not in fleeting pleasures or external validation, but in the integrity of their own character. For a Stoic, virtue, embodying wisdom, justice, courage, and moderation, serves as the compass guiding every action. When these qualities are cultivated, they foster a sense of coherence and authenticity within the self, laying the groundwork for genuine self-respect that isn't dependent on external circumstances. Marcus Aurelius, one of the great Stoic thinkers, reminds himself that the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts, emphasizing that nurturing virtues molds the inner landscape, leading to serenity rooted in moral uprightness. Inner peace springs from this moral clarity, a state achieved when one consistently aligns actions with virtues rather than transient desires. The process requires discipline, of course, a daily practice of reflection, moderation, and self-awareness. For example, exercising patience in frustrating moments, instead of giving in to anger, nurtures a quiet confidence that one's moral foundation remains unshaken. This consistency cultivates a sense of stability inside oneself, which becomes a wellspring of self-love. Because when we center ourselves in virtue, external setbacks and chaos lose their power to distort our inner equilibrium. As Epictetus put it, no man is free who is not master of himself, reinforcing that true freedom lies in self-mastery, sustained by virtue. Achieving this state involves a gentle yet persistent commitment, reminding oneself that flaws and mistakes are part of the human experience, but they do not define the whole self. Instead, they serve as opportunities to practice virtues like humility and resilience. When self-love is founded on this moral discipline, it becomes more resilient to societal shifts or personal failings. It becomes an acceptance, not a complacency, that growth is continuous, and each moment is a chance to reaffirm one's commitment to inner goodness. This foundation of virtue and inner peace ultimately nurtures a tender sense of worth that is deeply rooted in who we are, not what we have or achieve. Distinguishing between ego and self-compassion. In the journey towards self-love through Stoic philosophy, recognizing the difference between ego and self-compassion is vital. Ego often manifests as an insatiable need for validation, a desire to elevate oneself above others, or a tendency to cling to external markers of worth. It feeds on pride, comparison, and a fragile sense of superiority, often blocking genuine self-awareness. Conversely, self-compassion involves a deep, grounded acceptance of one's flaws and strengths alike, an acknowledgement that human imperfection is universal, not a failure. It's rooted in humility, understanding that being kind to oneself does not mean parroting praise or ignoring shortcomings, but rather seeing oneself clearly with kindness. Ego tends to distort our perception of what it means to love ourselves. When driven by ego, self-love becomes a superficial shield, a means to bolster fragile self-esteem or to mask insecurities. For example, someone might boast about their successes as a way of proving their worth, yet beneath that veneer lies a vulnerability that they are afraid to confront. Self-compassion, in contrast, is quiet and resilient. It allows us to hold our imperfections gently without judgment, recognizing that we are not defined solely by our achievements or failures. Marcus Aurelius noted, "When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, 'The day is my chance to practice patience, humility, and kindness,' emphasizing an internal practice rooted in reality rather than ego-driven fantasies. Practicing this discernment demands honesty and self-awareness. When you notice an urge to seek external validation, posting on social media for praise, constantly comparing yourself to others, it may be a sign that ego is at work. Reducing that tendency involves cultivating the inner voice of gentle honesty, reminding yourself that your worth isn't contingent on others' opinions. Self-compassion, on the other hand, involves a gentle inner dialogue that affirms your worth regardless of outcomes. Seneca's words echo here. We suffer more in imagination than in reality, suggesting that many of our ego-driven anxieties are magnified illusions. Recognizing that, a person who practices Stoic self-love sees mistakes not as failures, but as opportunities for growth, understanding that the ego fears vulnerability while genuine self-compassion embraces it as part of the human condition. By continuously questioning whether our motivations stem from ego or authentic kindness, we deepen our ability to love ourselves in a healthy, sustainable way. Self-compassion reminds us gently that we are enough, always. Ego, on the other hand, tries to convince us we need to be more, better, or different to deserve love. The Stoic way invites us to watch these impulses without attachment or judgment, cultivating a peaceful inner environment where love flows freely, not from a place of pride or shame, but from humility and clarity. As Epictetus put it, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. A reminder that our internal response, guided by wisdom rather than ego, defines the true state of our self-love. Practicing mindfulness and acceptance. The essence of practicing mindfulness and acceptance within the Stoic framework revolves around observing life and oneself with clear perception and gentle detachment. Rather than resisting emotions or external events, the Stoic approach encourages recognition of their transient nature. By grounding oneself in present awareness, one begins to distinguish between what is within control, our judgments, attitudes, and responses, and what is outside it, external circumstances, others' opinions, or unforeseen disruptions. This distinction diminishes the tendency toward internal chaos stemming from the inevitable uncertainties of life. Focusing on breathing, sensations, or simple observations creates a bridge between inner experience and external reality. When we learn to savor the small details, an aroma, a sound, a fleeting thought, our mind develops a tenderness that softens rigidity and cultivates acceptance. It becomes easier to extend compassion toward oneself when mindful awareness reveals the commonality of human imperfection. Recognizing that every feeling, be it frustration, longing, or disappointment, is part of the human condition fosters a gentle understanding rather than harsh judgment. Take, for instance, a moment of anger towards oneself for a perceived mistake. By pausing and observing that emotion non-judgmentally, we soften its sting. Marcus Aurelius advised, "Choose not to be harmed, and you won't be." This underscores the importance of mindful choice in how we relate to our feelings. Acceptance does not mean resignation, but an acknowledgement that life includes pain and pleasure alike. Both are passing clouds on the solid ground of inner peace. Practicing acceptance in everyday life involves cultivating patience and resilience while recognizing the natural course of thoughts and feelings. If a wave of anxiety rises unexpectedly, instead of battling it or suppressing, one can observe its shape and size, name it, and let it pass. This creates space, an act of kindness toward oneself, enabling us to respond rather than react. Such acceptance transforms internal resistance into compassionate presence. It's like tending a garden. By recognizing each weed or blossom without interference or disdain, we foster growth. Over time, this peaceful acknowledgement becomes second nature, shaping a resilient spirit that embraces life's ebb and flow with grace. As the Stoics remind us, harmony arises not from controlling everything outside, but from mastering our inner responses through mindful acceptance. Overcoming negative self-talk with reason. Negative self-talk is an insidious force, quietly eroding confidence and distorting our perception of ourselves. It often manifests as harsh judgments, calling ourselves incompetent when we stumble, or labeling our efforts as worthless after setbacks. Yet, the mind is capable of extraordinary reasoning, and the ancient Stoics knew that to silence this inner critic, we must first understand and challenge its foundations through reason. The human mind is not a mirror reflecting reality, but a battlefield where perceptions are shaped and reshaped by logic and perspective. When negative thoughts arise, they often carry an emotional charge that magnifies our flaws and diminishes our virtues. Recognizing that these thoughts are not facts, but interpretations, is a crucial step in overcoming them. One practical approach is to dissect these negative beliefs with rational analysis. Ask yourself, is this thought based on solid evidence, or is it an unfounded assumption? For example, if you think, "First always mess everything up," pause and examine the truth of that statement. Has every single effort ended in failure? Or are there successes you tend to overlook? Often, upon reflection, a pattern emerges. Mistakes are temporary, and they don't define your worth. Marcus Aurelius advised, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." By turning to reason, you recognize that setbacks are merely obstacles, not judgments of your entire being. They are opportunities for growth, not verdicts of inherent failure. Replacing destructive thoughts with logical validation can foster a more compassionate view of oneself. When self-criticism strikes, counter with questions rooted in reason. What evidence supports this negative belief? What evidence contradicts it? This technique slowly rewires the mind to see flaws within a wider context, rather than as defining truths. For instance, if you think, "First, I'm not good enough," challenge that by listing your qualities, achievements, and moments of kindness you've shown. This process echoes the Stoic ideal. Understand the nature of your thoughts, judge them impartially, and accept that your worth isn't dictated by fleeting emotions or external validation. Quietly, but steadfastly, reason becomes a gentle guide away from destructive self-talk, leading toward a steadiness rooted in truth. Over time, linking reasoning with self-compassion nurtures a resilient inner peace. The Stoics remind us that understanding and self-respect, in this context, arises from acknowledging our intrinsic worth rooted in rationality and virtue. The Stoics saw virtue as the highest good, an alignment with nature's rational order. To honor ourselves, then, is to act consistently with wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance, regardless of external circumstances. It's about maintaining integrity and dignity even when faced with adversity. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself, "Live according to nature," which involves not only recognizing one's innate capacities, but also respecting them. When we treat ourselves with this respect, we refuse to be swayed by superficial judgments or fleeting pleasures that threaten to diminish our true worth. Practicing self-love through this lens means extending kindness inward, celebrating the fact that we are part of a vast, rational universe, and treating ourselves with patience. For example, rather than criticizing ourselves for mistakes or shortcomings, we might reflect on them as opportunities for growth, understanding that they are natural parts of human development. Living in harmony with nature also entails accepting the ebb and flow of our emotional states. Anger, fear, or sadness are acknowledged as natural responses, but not as defining features. This creates a gentle, yet firm foundation of self-respect that sustains us through life's inevitable fluctuations, reinforcing that we are worthy of kindness, even from ourselves. In practical terms, aligning with nature and nurturing self-respect becomes an ongoing act of mindfulness and intentionality. It might manifest as setting clear boundaries, ensuring that our actions match our values, or simply pausing to consider whether our choices reflect our true selves. When we do so, we forge a bond with our inner nature, a relationship based on authenticity, dignity, and trust. As the Stoics advise, doing so fosters a life rooted in peace, where external circumstances no longer dictate our internal state, and self-love becomes a steady, unwavering current, an echo of the universal order that guides us. Maintaining balance, resilience, and gentle self-reflection. Resilience in the realm of self-love is often misunderstood as mere toughness or the ability to withstand life's storms, but true resilience, especially from a Stoic perspective, is more nuanced. It involves cultivating inner steadiness that allows us to bounce back gently after setbacks without sinking into despair or self-reproach. A core principle in Stoic philosophy is the recognition that external events are outside our control. Instead, it is our response that shapes our experience. When faced with failure or disappointment, resilience is expressed not through denial or suppression, but through a calm acknowledgement of what happened and a conscious choice to respond with patience and wisdom. This approach prevents us from being knocked off balance, allowing us to maintain a steady inner landscape while navigating life's unpredictability. Gentle self-reflection forms the other half of this balance. It invites us to look inward with kindness rather than judgment. The Stoics emphasize the importance of self-examination, but not as a tool for self-criticism, more as a way of understanding ourselves better and fostering growth. When we reflect gently, we recognize our imperfections, acknowledge our mistakes without condemnation, and then pivot toward improvement with compassion. For example, instead of berating ourselves for a mistake, we might ask, "What can first learn from this?" This fosters resilience because it frames failure not as a final defeat, but as a stepping stone. The masterful dance between resilience and gentle reflection creates a resilient self-love rooted in stable acceptance and ongoing growth. This balance encourages a tender yet unwavering stance toward oneself. It recognizes that self-love is not about inflicting constant positivity or ignoring pain, but about cultivating an unwavering kindness that endures even in difficult moments. When we stumble, the gentle voice within says, "It's okay. Everything passes. First, I'm still whole." Resilience rooted in this peace doesn't mean avoiding pain, but viewing it as part of the human experience, something to hold and understand with patience rather than repel or deny. As Marcus Aurelius advised, begin the morning by saying to yourself, "First shall meet with unkindness, ingratitude, ill will, contempt, and even perfidy, all of them due to the weakness of others." That calm, accepting stance exemplifies this delicate balance, resilience flowing with gentle self-awareness, unshaken by external turbulence, yet tender toward ourselves in acknowledgement of our imperfect humanity. As we come to the close of our journey into the Stoic way of self-love, remember that true strength lies in embracing ourselves with honesty and compassion. We've learned that cultivating self-awareness, practicing acceptance, and focusing on what we can control are pathways to inner peace. Marcus Aurelius reminds us, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. When we treat ourselves with kindness, even amidst life's chaos, we nurture a resilient heart grounded in wisdom. This path is gentle yet profound, a dance between acceptance and effort, patience and change. First, hope you feel encouraged to start viewing yourself through this lens, to nurture your inner calm and unwavering self-respect in every moment. Stay connected for more insights on living a resilient, peaceful life with strength rooted in the ancient wisdom of the Stoics. Thank you for sharing this space with me. Keep exploring, keep growing, and remember, your journey inward is the most beautiful voyage you can undertake. Until next time, may peace be with you.